Good morning. Today I'd like to take you into the forest and show you a bit about how we do our forestry here, how we work on restoring native biodiversity to our forest. It's a process. We've got a lot of trees that are growing, a lot of native trees, fruiting shrubs and so on that are growing that we need to protect from the invasive buckthorn that we have. The invasive buckthorn is something that we've had to keep on top of. However, as you'll see in the video, it's also something that is useful. Often the advice for invasive buckthorn is to cover it in a heavy plastic to completely kill the roots. However, we have so much of it that we'd have to cover our whole forest in heavy plastic, and then nothing else would be able to grow. So that's not an option for us. Our option is to live with that buckthorn and use what we can from it, and make sure that the native trees that we want to see come back keep the upper hand. So we're going to show you that today. We're going to show you the process of identifying the trees that we want to protect, and how we go about clearing around them and that sort of thing. We also have some other videos coming up in the next couple of weeks that some of which you've requested. For example, one is giving the onions a haircut, the onions that we've got planted indoors. Another one is identifying all of the trees that we have planted on this land that we have the privilege of caring for. The trees that we've planted, and also the trees that we've either propagated or that we have rescued from buckthorn, etc. So there's that one coming up on identifying all of those hundreds and hundreds of trees that we got. Another one coming up is the beginning process of building a chinampa for soil building. This will be the first time I'll be able to show you what it looks like now and what we do in the first year. So we'll show you that, and so that should be really interesting. So yeah, there's lots of videos coming up about forestry stewardship of the land. Winter's a great time to do that because it's a great time to be able to identify different trees and so on, which I'll be able to show you, and other plants. It's a great time to see what's going on in the forest, especially when there's snow and you can see the tracks and trails. So I really enjoy sharing that type of thing with you guys. And I really enjoy also getting your questions and getting your requests. And we do our best to be able to put out some videos in order to be able to answer those requests. So let's get started. So I'm sitting here with some of these stumps because the video I'm showing you today that I've just introduced, one of the important principles of permaculture, one of the most important, or what I like to call nature-guided principles, is stuff that you have to, let's say, use, stuff that maybe you have to take out of, well, quote-unquote take out of the forest or of the ecosystem. You don't actually take it out. You use it in place. You don't move it. It's good for permaculture. The principle is it's saving you work, it's saving you time. You're not bringing it from one place to another. You find your solutions in place. So that's the permaculture principle. All the permaculture principles have to do with saving you time, saving you steps, having your kitchen garden close to the house, having your main garden also close to the house, but having the wild part further away from the house. It's all about saving you time. However, the nature-guided principle is more specifically related to nature. And so we take this same principle, leave things in place, use them in place. So if this tree I had to cut because it was dead, it was going to fall down. Well, we've been wanting to have a place at a table out here in this, so what we call our camping area here, for a few years now. So this stump here, which is still attached to the ground, well, it's gonna be the main pedestal for a table. And these stumps here, got a whole bunch of them, got about 40 of them back here. There were already like 14, and the other day I created another 36 of them. These are going to be the chairs around the table. And for instance, in an upcoming video, I'm going to show you how we build a chinampa using the stuff from in place. And today, well, in the video that you're going to watch today, it's about saving the native trees that are there in place. So we don't actually have to bring more in, although we have been bringing more in because we had to really restore this forest. But what we're taking out is the buckthorn. Now, the buckthorn's not native, so there's nothing wrong with taking it out, although it's still organic material. It's still the sun's energy that was, used in this place. And so we'd like that energy, that sun's energy, in the form of sugars, in the form of wood, in the form of the buckthorn wood. We want to use it here in place. Leave it in the forest in any way possible, either creating a chinampa, creating an outline for garden, using the posts for fence posts, composting it, or just letting it lay on the soil and help build the soil in certain areas. So that is the important concept, the permaculture concept being find your solutions in place. The nature guided concept being don't take stuff out of the ecosystem. Leave it in the ecosystem. Add to the ecosystem if you can, good stuff. But mainly, the energy that's created in the ecosystem, leave it in the ecosystem so the ecosystem can use it. So there you go. I hope you enjoy the video. Let's get started. Here we go. So here's an ash, and here's some buckthorn. And this is how, for these last 4 years, the way I've always done it is, I've looked for trees that I've wanted to protect, like nannyberry, highbush cranberry, maple, oak, ash, etc. And if I saw buckthorn growing around it, that was the first that I would cut. And you see, that way it would help me make sure that I wouldn't make a mistake, because sometimes, if we're tired and we're not really being observant, especially when there are little branches like this, sometimes you can make a mistake. You can, especially when there are lots of branches, you can cut the wrong branch by accident. Cut this one instead of this one. And so, but by having a focus tree, a tree that you're trying to save, well, really that tree needs space. So it really doesn't matter what you cut around it, close to it, because you're giving that one tree space. And so I'm cutting the buckthorn, and if I accidentally cut some other little tree here, I don't want to do that. But if I accidentally do, that's really okay, because really there's only space for the one tree right here anyways. I wouldn't want to accidentally cut some really rare tree or something that was just starting to grow, but I'm usually pretty careful with that. But that has been my focus for the last 4 years. So when I'm cutting buckthorn or other invasive plants, I will focus on the tree that I'm trying to free up, and make sure that I don't cut that and I cut all around it. So here's one of the reasons why I do this. You can see here a bunch of small branches that I've cut. This is buckthorn that's trying to regrow. So I've cut the branches. You can see how small they were by where you can see the little cuts. So easy enough to take out. Now, so here was one, here was another. There's another that I still have to do. Now, 3 of them right there. Well, look what's right beside them. This is one of the trees that I'm working to reestablish. This, if If you look here at the buds, this is nannyberry, which is a native fruit. You can't find this in the grocery store. Tastes a bit like a prune or plum. It's delicious, but it's very small. But it's absolutely delicious. The deer love it, obviously, and the other animals, but so do I. And it stores really well too. You know, you pick it and it'll last 2 weeks on the counter while you eat it. You can make jam out of it too. So I've got hundreds of these that I'm restoring, making sure they don't get strangled by the buckthorn because they're slow growers. All of these little guys, these little buckthorns have to come out. It's important to be able to recognize the trees, identify them in the winter. Identify them through their growing patterns, through their buds, through their bark, etc. Here's a maple that I transplanted into here 2 years ago. It was only about the height of my hand, let's say. It was tiny. I transplanted it into here. It's doing well. But I identify it with this string. I just, every year I change the string's place, this twine. I change the place every year to make sure that it doesn't strangle the trunk. But it helps me identify it so that I can make sure there's no buckthorn strangling it out. So here's one example of how buckthorn is invasive. So let's look at this branch right here, okay, and it's right beside this other tree, which is growing in a fork right here. This is an ash, and this is a buckthorn. Buckthorn, ash. Now they're both about the same height. Ash is slightly higher, slightly taller. However, this buckthorn stem grew in a single season. It's about 1.5 meters tall, whereas this ash, is at least 2 years growth. And you see, if I were to leave this buckthorn stem in place, this year it would grow stems all along this little trunk. Probably have about 75 stems along here. And all these buds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, just 10 buds just along here. Okay, which would be 10 stems just along there. So yeah, at least 75 stems. It would completely strangle out this ash that's right here. So that's how the buckthorn is, and the roots grow the same way. Very, very thickly. And they grow in amongst the roots of the other plants and strangle them out. So here's a bunch of little buckthorn branches that grew in the last growing season that I've cut. Right beside them is another one of these maples that I transplanted in here. This is a Manitoba maple. We draw sap from it, and it's very adapted to this type of habitat. It likes the wet conditions. It's not really native to this particular region, but it is native to southern Ontario, and it's really helping us reestablish this forest. I've also been planting sugar maple, red maple, and silver maple in this forest. But this is an example of a Manitoba maple that I simply pulled out from my garden because it was growing like a weed in there, and I'm putting in here in the forest. We'll eventually be able to get sap from here and make maple syrup. So when it was so small, it was only about this high when I transplanted it, and I put one of these pieces of twine on it, and every year I come and I take the twine off and I move it higher so that it doesn't bite into the bark. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to untie this. I also try and tie it as loosely as I can. So I'm going to untie this, and I'm going to move it a little higher. See, there's a little bit of bark that peeled off there, but this is a Manitoba maple. That's going to heal up quite nicely. This is going to eventually grow quite big. So there it is. I've retied it. The reason why I identify these trees is when they're this small, when they're less than a meter tall, it's very easy to lose them. And when when maybe I'm clearing out some buckthorn or something, I might not notice it. I might cut it by accident, and I don't want to do that. And so it's just my way of making sure I can see it, so that I can look out for it to protect it. A lot of the trees that I'm protecting aren't this small, and so they're a little bit easier to notice. But in my first year, I went throughout the forest. My first winter, so in January and February of 2020, I went through the forest and I used twine like this that I was reusing from bales of straw that I had bought, and I identified all of the nannyberry, all of the highbush cranberry, all of the elderberry. Those were mainly the trees that I identified that first year. Later, I also did the same thing with oak that I could find and maple that I could find. Obviously, I didn't need to do it with things like white pine because they're quite obvious, quite easy to see. And so that first year, that's what I did. I first identified all those trees before I started to cut the buckthorn. And then, once all the trees were identified, I could more confidently begin to cut the buckthorn, knowing where my focuses were and where I needed to cut more and where I could wait a little bit longer. Where, if there wasn't any trees to protect in certain areas, then maybe that buckthorn would wait. But the first buckthorn I cut was the buckthorn that was surrounding all of the trees that I identified with this type of twine. And then as soon as I was done doing that work, I would remove the twine, unless the tree were tiny like this. Then I'll leave it on, but I will change its place every year. Here's another maple that I transplanted probably last year. You can see that how short it was, but it's grown. And now I'm going to go ahead and change the position of that twine. There, the twine was down there. Now it's up here. And then next winter I'll change it again. Unless it's really big, then I'll just take it off. And here is another one. This one's a good 1.20 meters tall. I'm going to change the position of this twine. Maybe next year we'll be able to remove it altogether. Different sized regrowth of buckthorn. This is 1 year, one season, let's say. This is also roughly 1 season, all that stuff. You can see the original trunk there, well, sort of hidden. And then here, this one, this is 2 year or maybe 3 years growth, but probably 2. You see, so right here at about 1.50 meters, 1.60 meters, you've got what would have been the first summer's growth after being cut, right up to here. And then you can see from here up would be the second year's growth, along with the branches. So if I don't cut this now, this trunk here, which is fairly thin, maybe the thickness of a marker, thicker than a pencil, but next year, I'd need something stronger than a pair of hand shears. Need something that you can't hold with 2 hands to cut it. So have a look at this. Here we've got some buckthorn that is strangling out this, what I believe is a type of dogwood right here. It's not the red-stemmed one, it's another type. But this buckthorn, there are a whole bunch of stems. That's a buckthorn stem, buckthorn stem, buckthorn, buckthorn, buckthorn. All that is buckthorn, and buckthorn stems over on the right. And then we have this one dogwood stem that stems out, of course, that gets more stems near the top. But if I don't cut these dozen buckthorn stems that are surrounding this one, by next year this one will just die. It will be strangled out. So Time to cut these guys. Let's see how tall this one is. Knee high, waist high, chest high, shoulder high, tall as me. Oops. This thing is over 2 meters tall, almost 2.5. That's one season's growth, one growing season's growth of buckthorn. This would have been cut last winter. Look at this little cluster of buckthorn here. So you can see the original tree that was cut right here. So, and you can see some of the shoots growing up there. There's another one there. One season's growth. But you can also look at here. See these are little side branches that grow out closer to the ground. They grow it horizontally, and eventually they introduce themselves into the ground and develop roots and then sprout another tree a little further away. So they're almost like roots, except they're lower branches. And the roots do the same thing. Here's some rabbit droppings. Rabbits will, when they don't have much else to eat, will eat buckthorn. And so cutting all these buckthorn down makes the buds accessible to the rabbits. However, when they've eaten buckthorn, if they go and have a pee somewhere on the snow, you'll see blue patches here and there, because when they've eaten buckthorn, it puts something into their pee that when that's exposed to the sunlight, it turns blue with the exposure to the photons of the sun. Here's some more rabbit droppings. There's all sorts of stuff the rabbits are eating here now, especially now that the snow is melting. There's lots of moss, base of fern plants and so on. Lots of seeds from grasses that were growing here, different types of native grasses. Here's a real thicket. There must be 50 branches here. But you see, each year as I do this, the branches that regrow become less and less vibrant, because they no longer have that big branch and leaf system and root system supporting all the growth. Because as I cut them, it has to take the energy from its reserves and its roots to grow more branches, but then I cut them again, and so on. And so each year they become a little less vibrant, but each year I use all those branches. This year what I think I'm going to do is leave a lot of these branches just on the ground so that they decompose. I have to make sure that they're kind of laying above the ground and not in contact with the soil, so they don't sprout new roots. People might wonder why I don't use a bush hog or some other bigger piece of machinery to cut through all of this. But the problem with using those is they don't allow you to do that fine identification work of the species that I want to stay. So this allows me to do a bit, make much more precise cuts to make sure that the plants that the buckthorn are surrounding don't get cut with the buckthorn. Another reason why I leave these stumps high is so that they're easy to find in the snow in the wintertime. Because when you've got about 15 or between 15 and 30 centimeters of snow here, between 5 and 10 inches of snow, then I wouldn't, I might not be able to see the base of some of the branches. I like to be able to see the base, see what's going on, and so that's why I do it like this. Here's a good example of some of the crazy things that the buckthorn does to spread. So you can see here, this was a fairly thick trunk originally, so the plant had a lot of energy to begin with after I cut it. So you've got lots of these branches growing out the side. One reason for this strategy is not only to go and look for earth where it can reroot, but also by growing out the side this way, when, you know, these branches with their leaves, they're going to shade the earth so that new little plants don't start to grow. You see, and so that way the branches that are vertical like this can have all that vertical space to themselves. So it's quite something, this plant. And then here is what I call an explosion of life. It's as if the buckthorn said, "You really want to cut me? Look what I can do." Look at all these branches going out in every single direction, horizontally down towards the earth, and then of course up. You can see the original trunk right there, and then up, 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 up. This one. Now, actually, look at here. So here's the buckthorn right here on the right that I'm touching with my finger. But then right here on the left, this is an ash. You see that? This ash would have been a goner. But now I'm gonna cut all these branches. So this one looks like I cut this trunk probably 2 years ago and probably haven't come back to it. This looks more like 2 years growth. This would have been right here, up here, at about 1.70 or so, like 5.5 to 6 feet. This would have been the first year's growth, and then these branches going out, second year's growth. So it's really fast. Got to keep on top of them. So there's the after. There's that same ash. There are those big pieces of buckthorn that I cut, but there are all these little pieces all over the place here. If there are too many at some point that are lying around, I'll probably pick a whole bunch of them up, and any chinampa that needs extra plant material, extra organic material, I'll take it to there. But otherwise, I like to leave a lot of this stuff in place so that I can just decompose and add to the soil. Because as long as it's nice and far from the soil, it shouldn't sprout any roots. Only if I were to like stick them right into the soil, they might start sprouting roots. When I'm working on cutting buckthorn, or anytime really when I'm working in the forest here, working on, you know, trimming or anything, if I know that I'm going to be around buckthorn, I use my safety glasses, because if you have a look here, this is why they're called buckthorn. These tiny little thorns, they're really small, but man, do they pack a painful punch. If you get one of these, you know, if you get it in the eye, you can do some damage. So I make sure I've worked out here without glasses, and I've gotten one of these in my eye. You know, you react to it obviously immediately, and usually it doesn't really harm, but it could. I've gotten one of these things in the eye, and it's hurt for a few days afterwards, giving me a headache and everything. So I've learned to make sure that I use my safety glasses when I'm out here. Really had to get used to wearing them, but it's important. It's not only when you're, you know, using a chainsaw or other tools like that, also doing something as simple as this. Here's another one. You can see that central trunk, and then you can see all the branches that came exploding out in all directions. Not too many plants grow like that out of one trunk. This is the one I was just showing you, and look right up the middle there. Right up the middle, right surrounded by all those little trunks. Got another ash here. Here it is again. All the branches cut. Breathe a little bit more easily. Ashes, they've got enough problems with the emerald ash borer that they need to get strangled out by buckthorn. We'll see. Here's Midi, and here's Hushy right here. Yeah, they're just following me around. Cousins, they're cousins. Here are a couple more examples of trees that I've been trying to protect. It's oak, a little oak tree that's growing. You know, I've got a stone down here identifying it, right in the ground. A stone with some twine tied around it, identifying this oak. And then right here, we've got basswood, also known as linden. The leaves of which are edible, by the way. This one's doing really well. And when I first found it in our first year in 2020, it was just tiny, and the deer would munch on it, because if the leaves are edible to humans, they're certainly edible to deer. But you know what? It grew full of life. You know, I made sure to get rid of all the buckthorn around it, and it's doing quite well. And right here, this tree, this is a nannyberry. Back in 2020, when I cleared all sorts of buckthorn around it, this is another one that was right beside it. That was probably no more than knee high. It was probably about that high, right there, right where that node is. So, yeah, these ones, they were just tiny and getting choked out by the buckthorn, but now look at them, they're about 4 meters tall. You can see some of the nannyberries still up there. Birds haven't eaten them yet. I could get up there and take those down and eat them, they'd be good. And here's another very good example of how the buckthorn grows. Just look at all those branches, and there's that curved trunk going through there. That's an ash trying to grow, and then there's a bit more buckthorn over through here. But within all that buckthorn, we've got right here this one that's trying to grow. This is what's called a prickly ash. It's actually not an actual ash. It's prickly ash. It's also known as Szechuan spice. It grows these tiny little berries that are spicy but not too spicy, and they actually they numb your tongue a little. They're interesting. They're quite good. So we grow our own spice too. And here's another regular ash tree right here. So yeah, we're trying to protect our trees. Get rid of some of this invasive stuff. And there's the after image of that one. It's probably hard to see in the, I can't really see it as I look at my camera image, my iPhone image, but when I'm looking around here, I can see all the branches that I cut that are laying on the ground. And of course, there's still a lot more to cut, but I think I'm gonna call it a day pretty soon. Here's a red maple I got from the local conservation authority to plant in here. Got about a half dozen of those. Some oak, some white pine, all sorts of others I can't think of right now. Here's the last word. This is when I was starting to get tired and started cutting them even taller. Look at this thing. This I cut down last winter. So, you know, February 2023. All of these branches have grown since then. Since February of 2023. Look at this little buckthorn. Well, little buckthorn. Look at this one regrowing. Now, but look what's hidden right beside it. Right there. You see that red bud there? That is a basswood. So that's the one I want to grow. So I'm going to cut all these branches and that basswood's going to be able to grow. And here it is. That little basswood all freed up. Now it'll be able to grow this year. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please feel free to ask any questions. And have a great week, and we'll see you next time.